The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden light across the foothills, painting the rolling countryside in soft amber tones. Somewhere in the distance, the faint chime of a church bell floated on the wind, and everything about that Saturday was meant to be perfect, or at least that's how Emily had imagined it. Her hair was pinned in loose curls, her white dress flowing like the wind itself, and her father was waiting by the door to escort her to the ceremony. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but happiness, as it turned out, had a knack for attracting trouble, and trouble came in the form of her. Margaret, Maggie Crane, president of the Hillside Meadows HOA, was a woman who had made an art out of controlling every inch of the neighborhood. She had rules for mailbox colors, rules for how long trash bins could be on the curb, and even rules about how many lawn ornaments one could display before it became tacky. But what she didn't have was patience for people she didn't personally approve of, and she certainly hadn't approved of Emily marrying Lucas. Lucas wasn't exactly the HOA's favorite resident. He'd bought his property, a sprawling 20-acre estate on the very edge of Hillside Meadows, long before Maggie's precious HOA had even been formed. His driveway intersected the only paved road into the gated community, and over the years, he'd refused more than once to be bullied into joining their rules. He wasn't hostile, but he was fiercely independent, and to people like Maggie, independence was the one thing they couldn't control. That morning, Maggie had been spotted marching around in her floral blouse and sun visor, clipboard in hand, whispering to two board members like she was planning a military operation. Most residents ignored her, but when the first of Lucas's wedding guests arrived, the whispers became action. By the time Lucas and Emily's closest family members were arriving, the tall black HOA-controlled gate at the start of the neighborhood road was chained shut, the heavy padlock dangling like a challenge. It started with mild confusion. Emily's Uncle Greg, driving a rented SUV, stopped in front of the locked gate and got out. He peered at the keypad, then at the chain, then back at the road behind him where two more cars had pulled up. He didn't know the code. Nobody knew the code. The gate had always been automatic, opening for any resident's plate number. But this wasn't a malfunction. This was deliberate. Emily's mother called Lucas, panic in her voice. "They've locked the gate. Half our desks are stuck outside." Lucas's jaw tightened. He had expected something from Maggie, a snide comment about noise, maybe even a passive-aggressive letter. But this was open warfare. He left his groomsman mid-toast, grabbed his phone, and called the HOA office. Maggie herself answered, her voice syrupy but smug. "Oh, Lucas, I'm so sorry about the inconvenience. There's been, a scheduling oversight. We had a private neighborhood event planned today, and we can't have all this wedding traffic disrupting it." "There's no neighborhood event," Lucas shot back. "Well," she replied with false cheer, "there is now." He hung up before she could say more. Around him, the wedding staff buzzed with anxiety. The florist fretting about wilting arrangements, the caterer nervously eyeing the time, the officiant pacing with his notes. Emily was upstairs, unaware of the full scope yet, but Lucas wasn't going to let her walk into a ruined ceremony. He knew something Maggie didn't. The gate she had just locked didn't actually belong to the HOA. The road was private. His grandfather had built it decades ago, allowing neighbors to use it under a legal easement. When the HOA was formed, they assumed control of it without ever checking the title records. But Lucas had checked, and Lucas was in no mood for subtlety. He called an old friend, Dale, a foreman for a local construction company. 10 minutes later, the sound of diesel engines rumbled in the distance. Maggie, standing on the other side of the gate with her arms folded, frowned when she saw 3 massive flatbed trucks, a skid steer loader, and a small crane pull into view behind the stuck wedding guests. Dale leaned out his truck window and grinned. "Where's the problem, boss?" Lucas didn't answer her, he answered him. "Right there. Remove it." Maggie's eyes went wide. "You can't do that," she shouted. "This is HOA property." Lucas pulled a folded document from his jacket, the original road deed, and held it up for everyone to see. "No, Maggie, it's my property, and you're trespassing." Dale signaled to his crew. Chains were hooked, the whine of hydraulics filled the air. Maggie's voice grew shriller, her protests drowned by the grinding scritch of metal as the gate's hinges tore free from the stone pillars. Onlookers gasped. Cars honked. Someone in the line of wedding guests cheered. The gate sagged, then fell flat onto the asphalt with a thunderous clang. Dust rose in the hot afternoon light as Lucas stepped forward, brushing his hands.
"Leave it there," he told Dale. "Makes a nice welcome mat." As the convoy rolled in, wedding guests drove past Maggie, some slowing just enough to offer polite or not-so-polite nods. She stood frozen, lips trembling with rage, but powerless to stop them. The legal easement was as real as the broken gate lying at her feet. By the time Emily emerged from the house, the road was clear, the guests were arriving, and the air was alive with music and laughter. But Lucas knew this wasn't over. Maggie wasn't the type to lick her wounds quietly. She'd be back, and he intended to be ready when she was. The wedding went on without another hitch, though whispers about the gate incident swirled between guests like wildfire. Emily didn't hear the full story until later that night, when she and Lucas finally had a moment to breathe. She laughed at first, a short, incredulous laugh, then shook her head. "Only you," she said, "would bring in a demolition crew on our wedding day." "Only her," Lucas replied, "would try to sabotage someone's wedding in the first place." But Lucas was right about one thing. Maggie didn't go quietly. The Monday after the ceremony, a thick envelope arrived in Lucas's mailbox, stamped with the HOA's gold seal. It was a notice of violation, citing him for property destruction, unauthorized road work, and endangerment of residents. It came with a fine, $25,000, and a demand that he restore the gate to its original condition immediately. He smiled as he read it. Emily, still in her robe, looked worried. "Can she actually make you pay that?" "She can try," he said. And try she did. Maggie called an emergency HOA meeting that same week, rallying her loyal board members like generals before a battle. They voted, unanimously of course, to pursue legal action. They thought they had him cornered. What Maggie didn't know was that Lucas had been preparing for this war long before the wedding. Months earlier, after she had sent a series of thinly veiled threats about bringing his property up to community standards, he'd gone digging into the neighborhood's history. The paper trail led him straight to the county recorder's office, where he'd unearthed decades-old deeds, maps, and, most importantly, the legal easement agreement that allowed neighbors to use his road. It was ironclad. Lucas didn't just hire a lawyer, he hired a team. A property rights specialist, a real estate litigator, and, as a little extra insurance, a private investigator named Tessa, who had a knack for finding skeletons in HOA closets. It didn't take long. The first bombshell came when Tessa discovered that the HOA had been collecting road maintenance fees from residents for years, despite not owning the road. Thousands of dollars had been funneled into general funds with no record of actual repairs. The second hit even harder. Maggie had used some of those funds to pay for landscaping on her own property, disguising it in the books as community beautification. Lucas's lawyers drafted a formal letter with exhibits and legal citations and sent it to the entire neighborhood. The subject line was simple: regarding the gate incident. It was a masterstroke. The letter laid out in meticulous detail how Lucas owned the road, how the HOA had no authority to lock the gate, and how Maggie's actions had not only been unlawful, but had exposed the association to potential lawsuits from every guest she had detained. It concluded with a polite but firm demand: the immediate resignation of Margaret Crane as HOA president and a full financial audit of the HOA's accounts. The fallout was swift and brutal. At the next HOA meeting, residents who had once been Maggie's allies turned on her like wolves. Some were furious about the misuse of funds. Others were simply embarrassed to learn they'd been paying for a road that didn't belong to them. Voices were raised, accusations flew, and Maggie, red-faced and stammering, tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. But the tide had turned. A vote of no confidence passed overwhelmingly. Maggie was stripped of her title that night. Within weeks, she had put her house on the market and vanished from Hillside Meadows altogether. Lucas didn't just stop there. With the HOA now in disarray, he negotiated a formal agreement with the remaining board. The gate would be removed permanently, the road would remain open, and the HOA would pay him a settlement for damages, a figure just slightly larger than the fine they'd tried to stick him with. On the anniversary of the wedding, Lucas and Emily hosted a barbecue at their home, inviting every neighbor, even the ones who had once sided with Maggie. In the place where the gate had once stood, Lucas had installed a wide stone archway, engraved with the words, "Welcome, road open to all." Some said it was petty. Lucas preferred to call it poetic. As the sun set over the hills and laughter echoed down the road, he knew one thing for certain. Maggie Crane had thought she could lock him out of his own life, but in the end, she'd only cleared the way for him to open it wider than ever.